Guys, we are so close to The Last Jedi where I'm sure we will have many questions answered and have many more questions brought up. Snoke's identity is one of the most curious parts of this new trilogy, and I've been a huge fan of him being connected to the Whills. In this video, I'm breaking down everything we know about the Whills and how Snoke could be connected to these ancient and powerful creatures. Let's talk about it. What is up, YouTube? It's Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. If you love Star Wars, subscribe to this channel. Going to be covering all sorts of theories and all sorts of goodness heading to The Last Jedi and beyond it. Oh, and shout out to Daniel Asher, who got the nerd card question correct in my last Snoke video. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to Star Wars, so shout out to you, Daniel. There will be another nerd card question at the end of this video. So guys, I recently did a Snoke theory video that talks about how he came from the Old Republic. I definitely suggest going and watching that if you haven't, as this video is sort of a part 2 to that. So I'm going to talk about the Whills and how I believe Snoke will be revealed to be one of them, or perhaps a shaman of their ancient order. So first, we'll go over the Whills themselves and why Disney has brought them back into the canon predominantly. Now, if you've been following the channel for some time, you know I've been a fan of the Snoke being a Whill theory since Rogue One. Some of what I'm about to go into, you might have even heard if you've watched my Who Are the Whills in Star Wars video, but I need to frame this theory properly. So the Whills are actually an integral part of Star Wars that most Star Wars fans have never heard about. This is, of course, until Rogue One mentions them by name. They talk about the Guardians of the Whill and how they were the protectors of the Kyber Crystal Temple. You see, in George Lucas's original draft for Star Wars, he imagined the Force as these omnipresent entities that were cataloging the events of the galaxy in a journal. And so all of the story was supposed to be told from the perspective of the Whills as they watched the adventures of Luke Starkiller. Now, a lot of that got changed, and he abandoned the idea of the Whills because, well, quite frankly, it's super trippy and weird and hard for people to understand. So he changed the Whills into just the Force itself. But the Whills were never far from his mind as George revisits them during the creation of Revenge of the Sith. In the script for Revenge of the Sith, there were several scenes referring to the Whills and a shaman of the Whills. These scenes all circled around Qui-Gon Jinn and the immortality that he would go on to achieve through what most fans will refer to as the Force Ghost. This was, totally abandoned except for a small part at the end of the movie where Yoda tells Obi-Wan that he has received contact from his old master and learned a technique to communicate back from the other side. This is pretty much all that is in the Revenge of the Sith movie of the Whills. The concept of the Whills teaching Qui-Gon Jinn were put into the last episodes of the Clone Wars. Now, James from the Rebel Scum podcast and I actually got into a little Twitter argument with Pablo Hidalgo where we basically talked about the Force Priestesses, the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, which talks a lot about Qui-Gon's relationship and training with the Whills. And look, the whole thing was kind of weird, and Pablo Hidalgo sort of took back something that he said, but he essentially confirms that the Force Priestesses at the end of the Clone Wars are indeed the Whills or connected to them in some way. In those last episodes, Yoda is contacted by Qui-Gon Jinn, who has found the path to immortality through the teachings he learned from a shaman of the Whills. So despite changes to canon, it remains a part of the story that Qui-Gon Jinn did this, and the Whills are responsible for the Force Ghost in Star Wars. And the Force Ghosts play a huge role in almost all of the films, though they have not been touched in the new Lucasfilm canon, at least not on the silver screen. In Rogue One, Disney name drops the Guardians of the Whills as the protected of the Kyber crystals. At the time, I did a video talking about this and why it was such a big deal. You see, the cuts from previous films kept the Whills from the consciousness of mainstream fans. Now, they are being brought back into the forefront of our minds, and there is a reason for that. I also want to note that the quotes at the beginning of the Force Awakens novel, this quote is literally from the Journal of the Whills and talks about resolving through the darkness and the light through refined Jedi sight, and talks about the gray. Yet again, this is another sign of Disney making people aware of the Whills in their new canon. Now let's fast forward to The Last Jedi itself. We know that Luke Skywalker has been on a journey to better understand the Force. This journey has taken him to Ahch-To and given him what we think is the actual Journal of the Whills. This is that book that is in the trailers. It's the thing that he keeps in that little temple of his, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that it is the Journal of the Whills. If it is likely that Luke learns some teachings within the journal that are actually counter to the teachings of Yoda's Jedi. You see, the Whills and the Jedi, or the Guardians of the Whills rather, and the Jedi, saw the Force in different ways. All of that is to say that the plot of The Last Jedi will circle around ancient Force knowledge, and probably the knowledge given to other people from the Whills or the students of the Whills. Now let's talk about Snoke. You see, one of the big problems that Disney faces with this character is explaining how he's such a threat without diminishing the villains of the original trilogy. This is just bad for them from a branding perspective, and it might actually piss some of the hardcore fans off. You see, they need to satisfy the hardcore fans in a way, but also make Snoke make sense to casual audiences. In my Snoke theory video, which I referenced at the beginning of this video, I talk about how Snoke will be revealed to be an immortal being that is ancient and probably from the Old Republic times. Making him a Whill or a shaman of the Whills is a canonical way to get to that time period. This would also tie him to things that have happened in the other movie. Now, there was a great Reddit post made about this by XRQ several months ago, and he goes into patterns that he sees in Disney films, basically where Disney will make the villain a dark, evil creature that's supposed to represent evil, and it basically make devils out of a lot of their main villains. You have to also remember that Star Wars, in general, paints its mythology right over top of established philosophies or religions. This is part of the reason why Star Wars has such mass appeal. They basically have little pieces of mythology and stories from all sorts of different cultures around the world. This is where you get the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell type stuff, the repeated stories of us as humans that get put in to Star Wars. All of these ideas support Snoke being a Whill, as he can be thought of as a god or an angel that has rejected the power or fallen from grace. This is very similar to the story of Lucifer, in which Lucifer gets jealous of God's compassion for humanity. He doesn't think humanity is worthy of the gifts that God gives them, and then falls from grace in order to show God how flawed humanity really is. So if he is a fallen angel, essentially you could say to casual fans, oh, he's this entity that's very godlike and fell from grace. And then you could tell the hardcore fans that he's a fallen Whill who was trapped by the ancient Jedi. This would satisfy both groups and make his power easily understandable to all audiences. It would also keep the villains of the past from being tarnished, as they would sort of be separated from whatever this legacy is that Snoke will have. Consider also that Snoke even looks like one of the Force priestesses, which I'm pretty sure are the Whills. And remember that Disney has done a lot to put the Whills back into the consciousness of fans. When you start to think about all of that, I believe you'll come to believe, as I do, that there is a strong possibility that him being a Whill or a shaman of the Whills is an explanation that would satisfy everyone. Lastly, I really recommend going and watching the last episodes of the Clone Wars, which focus on the Whills or Force priestesses, and it talks a lot about the living Force and the cosmic Force. I don't necessarily want to go down that road in this video, but very briefly, everything that is in our known galaxy would make up what you would call the living Force, and everything that basically flows to us from beyond the veil in the cosmic Force is, well, the cosmic Force. And so the Whills are sort of an in-between. Although they majorly, I believe, exist in the cosmic Force, they affect things that take place in the living Force. And it is possible that Snoke fell from grace in order to come into our known galaxy, be a part of the living Force, but he feeds off of the cosmic Force, which is something I sort of go into in my previous Snoke video. But that's pretty much all I wanted to put into this video, guys. I definitely think that Snoke will be connected to the Whills in some way. My money is that he is a fallen Whill, or that shaman of the Whill, perhaps even the same shaman of the Whills that taught Qui-Gon how to achieve immortality. This would be pretty intriguing and sort of put a stain on the ways of the Jedi from the past and connect them to an ancient evil. How intriguing would that be? Let me know in the comment section, and let me know all of your thoughts about Snoke and what you think he could end up being down there in the comment section. All right, let's check that nerd card really quickly. I want to know about a time period in the old extended universe. There was this group of aliens that ended up invading our known galaxy. It was this really sort of comic booky, almost Marvel time period in the EU. What was the name of the alien race that invaded? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day. See ya!